Talk about what you guys like. I don't know if you have some barrels.
Is that my water? It's gotta be my water.
I know it's not many ones.
No.
This was mine, right?
That was yours. Because we want to be.
Yeah. They did it fast, but. I'm fine.
And I just think.
No.
I can be clear. I know right at home.
No, you're right. Don't.
Yeah, maybe why don't we get a quote from that? I told Dave, I said, could you do it possibly, but it's so tight that I'm like, it's gonna be. And if we don't Like if we run a door line, like I told David, if we run the door line, and it doesn't work, then we'll have somebody do it. It's okay. Right.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you, appreciate it.
Jeffrey will sign up.
How are you? Good, thank you.
All right, call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Brenner,
Here.
Dr. Petula,
Here.
Mr. Koplitz,
Here.
Dr. Schumacher,
Here.
Mr. Sefner,
Here.
Ms. Shields, and Dr. Burks.
Here. Pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And someone read mission statement, please.
Cultivating learners who apply skills and experiences to enrich society.
Public comment. Okay, so we want to, just for the record, we want to let the public know that we did receive petitions and comments. I believe there's approximately 400 signatures. Oh, that's the second one? Okay. This is on the, we put this actually on the main agenda because we want to have a discussion around this. So this is just to let the public know, we have the petition, it's been received, all the board members, it's entered as public record, and it will be, it's also on the agenda. So any other comments, Kathy? No. this one too. Okay, there's another one too. All right. Want me to read that? All right, so we also received a letter on June 9th. I was new to the school district as of the past school year with my kindergarten student. I understand the adversity and the complications that the COVID pandemic put on the school year for all concerned. My father is a retired public school teacher of 32 years, so I understand both sides more than average. Having stated that I am terribly concerned and completely disheartened by what I've learned watching my child and stepchildren encounter. My two youngest attend in-person learning for most of the school year, with the exception of my kindergartner, who I chose to e-learn the first quarter. My eldest child chose to e-learn the entire year. I am profoundly upset with the way the district conducted the e-learning for the high school, since that is all I can speak on. No mandatory class time, no attendance taken from his classes, little to no emails or phone calls for missing or uncompleted work. The children were left to learn and complete assignments, testing with little to no real effort put into the teaching of the curriculum. They solely were responsible for doing this all on their own with little direction. Come year's end, and probably much before, when the students, teachers, and administrators realized that the kids' education has suffered, lacked, or however you would choose to phrase it. Now we are allowing students to make up work and retake tests to improve grades 2 weeks after the school year is ended. Testing centers open to do better, and this is not even a testing center, but a virtual situation. How does anyone know who's doing the work or taking these tests? How do we know that these kids are not getting outside help? How do we measure the success of our children this way? Does it even matter as long as the district can say that the school report card is good? This way of, quote, education, unquote, is based on lies and half-truths. It's teaching our children that it's okay to not be prepared. It's teaching them that it's okay not to hand in work. It's teaching them that it's okay not to study. It's teaching them that it is not to be accountable for their own actions. It's teaching them that it's okay to put things off. It's teaching them that failing in life is okay because you will be given chance after chance. It's teaching them when the chips fall that it's okay to cheat. This is not okay. I pay in excess of $7,600 a year in taxes to the school district alone, and I refuse to allow for any school district to teach my kids the exact opposite of what I have taught and will continue to teach her, because your way is not real life. This way is not teaching them to be productive members of society with morals, values, responsibilities, and self-worth, but the exact opposite. Please explain to me how this continuation of entitlement will benefit my child or any other children. I can assure you that I am a very involved parent and stress the importance of education to my older children and my younger one, and I take every involvement in said education, but I cannot and will not support this. Patricia Vick.
With the high school. It's gotten back to the parent immediately following that corresponding a couple weeks ago. Just look towards there.
All right, we went back to our committee structures. So committee reports are on the agenda. So Dr. Schumacher, student success.
Yeah, we had a couple of, my apologies. We had a couple of items on the agenda this past week, and most of those things we will hear a little bit later on in old business. We had the YHSE Sports Gaming Lab proposal, which we discussed, and we'll talk about that a little bit further with Mr. Atkins. We discussed the 2021-2022 academic calendar, and then we also had a current assessment of the performance of District 115 dual language program. So we'll hear more about those a little bit later on with Dr. Ball.
Community awareness, I believe Tom, you presided over that committee, and you and I both did.
If you remember right, in part way we brought bringing back to the contract services of John Ford for our school psychologist. That'll be on the agenda later on, and it's funded. That's also outside funded by a grant. The hiring of Denise McCarthy as a student services contractual administrator. That's on the agenda later on, and we've got some policies on display.
And then operational excellence.
Yeah, we had a number of items on that. We had the FY '22 budget, tentative budget, which will be presented on the agenda later on today. We reviewed the Van Gogh photography, which we looked at the options on that, and I think that's going to be discussed later on the agenda. We recommend the renewal of the Coca-Cola beverage contract, that would be on the agenda. We reviewed the hazardous bus routes. We took a look at the purchasing a new bus for the activity bus, for another activity bus we have here, that'll be on the agenda also. And we also put policies on display.
And then last, community you oversaw, is the community partnership with home and community.
And then the primary option we had on there was discussing the alumni recognition program that was presented. And we were holding off approval or more discussion on that and implementation for after our board work session on the 22nd.
All right, anything else on committee reports? Moving on to consent agenda, and we need that entire motion read, please.
Approve the minutes of the May 24th, 2021 Board of Education meeting, May 24th, 2021 executive session, June 14th, 2021 committee meeting, the activities fund report for May 2021, the final bills and claims for May 2021 in the amount of $767,229.31, and the bills and claims for June 2021 in the amount of $5,139,924.03. FOIA request received on May 25th, 2021, responded to on May 28th, 2021 from Tony Walsh from the Chicago Laborers District Council requesting a copy of the bid tabulation from the seal coating and stripping bid on May 20th, 2021, and the date of the board meeting when awarded. FOIA request received June 22nd, 2021, responded on June 24th, 2021 from Christian Siermetis at Tuscany Strategy Consulting LLC requesting contract, RFP, purchase order form, and all items associated with the purchase order 195439 from Lalilo Learning Supplements and destroy the July 29th, 2019 executive session recording.
Second.
Moved and seconded, additional discussion. Roll call, please.
Dr. Katsula?
Yep.
Mr. Kozowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Brenner?
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Mr. Sefner?
Yes.
And Dr. Burks?
Yes. And then moving on to treasurer's reports.
Okay, May, another good month to report. We're currently at 79% of revenue, but that'll take a big jump up in the month of June. We did receive our large payment from Kendall County, which was more than we anticipated. So typically we get about 50% of our total anticipated levy here in June, and we actually got about 52.6%. So we're actually going to be about 1.7 million favorable on a full year basis from a levy perspective. We're also going to be about $1.1 million favorable from a state revenue perspective. We do typically budget for 3 payments. And if you remember, we have already gotten 4 this year. Nothing really else to report kind of on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, we are at 89 point, almost 90% on salaries versus the 91.6 that we would expect. So we're pretty close there. We're showing favorability in benefits, but that's primarily driven by our $1.5 million fund balance that we've added this year for our health benefit reserve. And then we will be favorable related primarily to transportation, because we didn't incur a lot of our original transportation costs at the beginning of the year, particularly for our special education. And then from a transition fee perspective, we had continues to run favorable. We had about $42,000 of regular transition fees and $39,000 of grant reserve transition fees. So all in all, another favorable month, but to be expected with kind of how we had budgeted and what we've been seeing on a year-to-date basis. So nothing unusual to report. But happy to answer any questions.
I make a motion to approve the treasurer's report presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, additional comments. Because this is such an important
Kozowitz,
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And then we're on to personnel recommendations, and first is the IMRF authorized agent. So need a motion, please.
Motion to approve the IMRF resolution and appointment of the IMRF authorized agent as presented.
Second.
Moved in second, additional discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And then we have a tender.
Yeah, this is a person that we missed during our last tenure. Nicole DeGros received 3 excellence in a row, which under school code would has automatic tenure. Just want to bring it to the school.
Motion to accept the tender report, place on file.
Second.
Moved in second, additional discussion. Let's do a roll call. It's an important milestone.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. Then we have a school psychologist services, excuse me. So need a motion, please.
Motion to approve the school psychologist contract services for the 2021-22 year as presented.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional comments?
Was there a point for Mr. Gordon? No? I'm sorry. I thought you were-
Okay, we discussed it at committee. Okay. Did you have a question?
No, I thought he was going to, I thought Charles was going to speak before we had the motion. Sorry.
Moved and seconded, no comments, roll call, please.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes, and then we have student services contractual administrator.
Motion to approve the student services contractual administrator for the 2021-2022 school year is presented.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And then we have some co-curricular resignations.
Motion to approve the co-curricular resignations as presented.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And then we have some co-curricular hires.
Motion to approve the co-curricular hires as presented.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional comments? Roll call, please.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And then we have some resignations.
Motion to approve the resignation is presented.
Second.
Moved in second, additional discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And we have some summer school hires.
Motion to approve the summer school hires is presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And then we have some transfers.
Motion to approve the transfers as presented.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And then last, we have a couple other hires.
Motion to approve the hires as presented. Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And then moving on to old business, we have YHS Esports Gaming Lab proposal.
Yeah, this was discussed at committee, and Dr. Brenner, I just wanted to update you on a couple of things. When we talked 2 weeks ago, the quote was right at $100,800, and now it's at $98,000. So some of the equipment prices changed, so it actually changed in our favor. So you'll see it's $2,000 cheaper than when we spoke a couple weeks ago. I did check, all of the equipment is actually in stock, which is surprising. So if it's ordered tomorrow, we should have everything hopefully by the middle of next week, which we were excited about. And then the lab, when we spoke about it, is the lab here in the library. to just kind of give you some perspective of what we're looking at with the engagement with all the windows and kind of trying to build that excitement. So just a couple of points that I wanted to update the board on.
Motion to approve the Yorkville High School Esport Gaming Lab proposal and the purchase of equipment in the amount of $98,414.37 from SHI.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Dr. Katsula, Mr. Kozowitz.
Yes.
Mr. Sefner
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. Then we have the 21-22 assessment.
Yeah, this is an annual item that we bring to the board and we discussed at our committee. I outlined a summary of the recommended changes for the 21-22 school year that's in public view. Also, just want to remind the board that as information changes throughout the course of the year, dates changes, we do update that document and publish it on the web.
Motion to approve the 2021-2022 assessment calendar is presented.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Then we have kindergarten through grade 6 social studies resource.
Yes, this is also an item that was discussed at committee. If you remember a few months ago, we approved some 7-12 resources to support our social studies curriculum. And this is the K-6 version of that.
Motion to approve TCI resources for the K-6 social studies curriculum as presented.
Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion? Roll call here.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katsula,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes. And we have the current assessment of performance of District 115 dual language program.
Yeah, this was an item. I want to thank Mr. Michael Camp, who is our coordinator for bilingual English services. He had a presentation that he prepared for our Student Success Committee meeting. The data is there for you, and the story that it tells is that our dual language program is performing what the research said it would do. And our students in the dual language program are performing in ELA and math at the same level of proficiency or better than our students in our general education program.
Motion to accept the dual language program report and place it on file. Second.
Moved in second, any additional discussion?
I think it's just good to remind people that it's beyond just the fact that people are better. It's the fact that many of these students will be in the gaps that we were gap. And that they're able to be successful at the level of students that aren't in that same demographic. So it's one way to eliminate those demographic gaps without having to do interventions.
So the gains are actually greater than they would assume, because typically you would have tendency to see gaps.
And then trends continue to move upward.
And they're requiring a second language as well.
Exactly. So it's a far more rigorous curriculum.
Right.
Really good stuff. Really good stuff.
So moved and seconded, all those in favor to put the report on file?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And then we have the FY22 tentative budget.
I'll put the motion on the floor. Motion to approve the FY21 tentative budget as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
22, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, FY22, yeah. Jason, you seconded. Moved and seconded, additional discussion or comments? Mindy, any comments?
Just wanted to say that I think we did an extremely kind of thorough job this year with the tentative budget. Probably, obviously last year we had COVID going on and a lot of other things, so we weren't able to pay as much attention. But I would say, particularly in the area of salaries, we really did a bottoms up, thanks to Troy Courtney for a lot of the work that he did, and we're really working as a collective group to make sure that at any point in time we know what our salaries are. Then we had some of the typical changes that we would expect. Benefits, we usually project that we're going to have a 3 to 5% increase. Again, we were able to keep those flat for both the district and employees, which is great news. So we were able to take that out. We did true ups on things like transportation. Obviously, we think those costs are going to go up next year relative to where they've been. We had some true ups on food service because the summer food service program is going to continue. So we'll be able to feed our students for free. So there were some changes there. some changes in special education tuition, which relate directly to the students that we have on site. So, I think we had a pretty good tentative budget. Obviously, we've got some things that we'll be updating the board on between now and September. The tax levy, so we'll do updates based on receipts, based on CPI, where we think that's looking at. COVID-19 is going to be a big update in terms of how much of that money we want to spend this year versus future years, because some of those programs have a multi-year window into which you could spend it. So we want to look at the projects and things that we want to do and make sure that we're spending that in a judicious manner. And to that respect, there's actually another $771,000 that we were advised of last week that we will be getting related to COVID-19, and that'll be split in 3 areas: learning loss, summer enrichment, and after-school programming. So that's in addition to the money that we already thought we would get, which would bring our total up to just under $4.6 million for the various pieces of the CARES Act. So, and I think other than that, we'll continue to bring you updates between now and September.
And that's federal money.
That's federal money, correct?
Yeah, and it has significant strings attached, not that they're unreasonable, but they have to be spent in a very specific manner.
Some of the pieces do, like this new piece specifically, it's got 3 different buckets on how it needs to be spent. The last $2.2 million that we got, 20% of that had to be spent on learning loss. It was pretty flexible outside of that. And the other about $1 million that we got had even less strings attached. So it's been getting a little bit more specific as they've given additional money. Yeah, if they've given additional money, there's been some more specifics. And then we're always looking at other opportunities or grants. There's one related to, providing Wi-Fi and access to our students that we might be able to help our students with. So that's something that Ryan and I will be working on. So, we're really trying to find all of that money. One thing that Mike's going to help us with before we leave is IEMA. That was a kind of an old grant that was out there that was supposed to be more for kind of cleaning supplies and PPE, and they've lifted some of those restrictions. So that's money that we'll be able to get retroactively back to March. So that'll be reimbursement for things that we've already spent. Whereas some of this CARES money is money we'll spend in the future, but it'll be funded. It'll be funded in the future. So we're going to, like I said, work with the entire cabinet team, with the board, to make sure that we're using those funds as judiciously as possible.
Thank you.
No, I did a great job, but just informed all along.
What's the next step for the budget? Remind the board as far as timing. Once I come back to the board.
I'm not sure that we'll have any updates in July, but we might have updates in July, but for sure we'll bring it back in August. And then obviously we'll bring it back again in September at both the committee level and, obviously to the full board. Yeah, and then we'll prove it. And we will, there is the requirement to post in the newspaper, and that's actually ready to go for this Thursday. So that's well in advance of the 30 days that we need to get that posting out. So that'll happen as well.
And we'll typically, as we always do, we'll look at the long-term
Correct.
projections, because it's a point in time. We like to concentrate on the 3 to 5 year projection as well. So we'll do that during our summer session.
Correct, and that's one of the things that we like using that forecast 5 model, because as we drop things in, we can say, this is a one-time revenue source or one-time expense, and then really have a good understanding of what that looks like multiple years from now.
This data will also be very important as we start our discussions with the union. We'll begin that later this summer. We typically sit down with them as a collective group, and we have a full transparency. Here's all of our books. Here's where we are financially. Here's where we're projected to go. And then we collectively talk about what does this mean for our staff and the compensation moving forward, and try and work through that together. So it's, as the board knows, it's not a push a number across the table and they give us one back. It's a collective discussion and agreement based upon the reality of our current financial state, as well as what we want to do, where we want to be 5 years from now. The board's been very fiduciary responsible over the years. And I think we've proven that we continue to do the same at the district level. But we appreciate that guidance from all of you and the oversight that you've provided. And I think our community expects that as well, so that we can continue to provide programs for kids and opportunities.
And our strong fund balance policy allows us to make decisions when some boards can't make those decisions. So like, some boards are cutting programs, we're adding programs because of that judicious look at the budget. So thank you. I know it's a community effort. So thank everyone's part of this.
So Mindy, going forward here, I just wonder among business managers and various schools that you work with,
Sure.
is there any discussion about the alternate reality that schools get fully funded and taxpayers still aren't getting their refunds from 2021 or 2020 from the state? I mean, and they claim it's because they have no money. So I just, it seems like we were riding this wave, and I'm curious, is there discussion about how long they think these kind of things are going to go on? I mean, the forward payments was not expected. Are we really expecting that next year, or what's the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some respects, right, it's too early to tell. They did, this year we didn't get kind of that additional funding typically that we do, but that's something that's now funded, in the budget, that additional $350 million. So, there's been some talk about that. There's always talk on the table about potential property tax freezes. There's always talk about the pension cost shift. So those are things that I think we want to make sure that even if we don't necessarily include them, in our numbers, because they're not necessarily reality, that they have to be out there and that we can size those and understand, what those impacts are.
Right.
So I think that's important. There is legislation though that's on the table that's actually going to let us get some property tax abatements back, which actually should be a benefit to us. And that's something I'll be working on this summer, is to try to understand what that might be worth, what that might be worth to the district. So, I think
That doesn't come without
correct.
costs either,
Correct. So I think it's
especially to the local taxpayer.
correct.
Right.
And I think it's really looking at kind of both sides of the ledger and trying to have kind of that balanced and transparent approach so that we don't get surprised at some point down the road, and that we understand what the potential, ramifications are. I'm curious this summer, what we're going to get. We'll be filing soon for our transportation plan. And obviously we have transportation costs, a lot of other districts didn't. So are they going to give us the historical percentage? Will we get a higher percentage because there's less people in the pool? It's a little bit unclear as to where they're shifting money to and from, and what that could mean to us, and in these various pools of money. So we'll continue to take a look at it. We're constantly scanning with peer-to-peer. We have a network where people are always kind of posting. I was just at annual conference a couple of weeks ago, so got some really good thoughts there from some seminars and things that I attended. But definitely, we're all going to be staying linked into the various assumptions that we're making.
Okay.
And
And
we're
we will-
obviously seeing the increase of raw foods and inputs. We're seeing the upward pressure of prices of inputs, so that could have long-term effect on budget. Bob, it was such an important topic that I attended the exec committee for Three Rivers, which is the division that we're part of. And I believe for the spring meeting, the speaker will be on the financial situation of the state of Illinois, because Bob, to your point, this money it's not free.
No.
And it's robbing Peter to pay Paul sometimes, and in the end, where does that all end? So it's on everyone's mind as well, which is why they invited executive director to talk specifically about these ramifications to the district. So that, I believe that's on the spring meeting
Right.
in March.
Right.
information?
Um,
All right, let's have a roll call, please.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
Mr. Sefner,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Dr. Katula,
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
and Dr. Burke.
Yes. And we have photography vendor services. Just the one that we're.
okay.
Put it on the table? Okay, need a motion and then we'll,
I'll put the motion out there. A motion to approve the 3-year photography services contract with Van Gogh School Photographers Incorporated as presented.
Second.
okay, moved and seconded, discussion.
Well, we've all received information on this, and there may be some things that obviously not all of us know about. So is there anyone here? Yeah. Would you like to address this?
I could, sure.
Yeah, is Tammy here?
No, she's not.
Yeah, so since you're here.
Thank you. Mrs. Eaton is our yearbook sponsor, and Van Gogh had reached out to us, and so she did some investigating, and she found that it would be $26.50 for the same yearbook that we had this past year. We always have charged $20 for our yearbook. And the cost is $15, and then the yearbook club gets $5 back per yearbook to fund the yearbook club through cameras and different supplies such as that. And so she had brought up the concern, and I agree with her that $30 seems excessive for a middle school yearbook. I've been in conversation with Mr. Vargas about this, and we're going to try and figure something out. You know, we have not had a price increase in our yearbook in several years. And we'll try and figure it out in terms of the cost, and maybe $30 isn't unreasonable. But that's just my opinion for a middle school yearbook. But so that was just a concern that had been brought up by our yearbook sponsor.
So is there any discussion among your group that you may be looking at a different vendor to possibly mitigate the cost?
It's my
That's really what this comes down to.
Right, it's my understanding though that it's a whole package deal, that it can't be an a la carte, if you will. Mr. Vargas, is that accurate?
That is correct. When we created the agreement with Van Gogh, having them do the yearbook supplements was part of that.
Okay, so why are we approving this then? I mean, if we've already agreed to it, why do we have a motion?
I'm not sure I understand. your
Well,
question.
so if that was part of the agreement we approved with Van Gogh, we're not going to approve every single thing they do. Why are we approving this particular motion?
I don't believe that we ever specifically approved Van Gogh. We've talked about it. We were working with them because obviously our prior photography vendor did not go well last year. So
Yeah, I remember
that's
that.
why we're coming
That's why I
back.
thought we had approved a new vendor. but-
Yeah, I think we talked about it, but I think we were waiting to act. I think we were waiting to actually approve it. So this was to approve the collective contract. So the vendor and wanting to, anticipate and kind of reach out, that's when we were made aware of the price difference. We knew originally they were not the vendor we chose. When we looked at cost, we looked at a lot of things, but, I know a lot of people on the photography committee specifically were extremely impressed with the products that they produced relative to what we were able to get from some of the other vendors. Whether or not it's, worth that significantly more, I guess I'm not sure, but it is right now, it's a collective process. You can share it because they, certain things will take a loss on, certain things, that's where the vendors, are kind of their sweet spot. So certainly now that we're aware of this issue, we're happy to, work with the middle school and see can we look, potentially at a different price? Can we find a way to, help, ensure that our families
So
will
maybe
have a
shift.
reasonable price? Exactly. So it might be a combination, of things.
Okay.
This motion is to approve to approve the entire
It's the
contract,
entire
but there's,
contract, but
there's
it needs to be
others,
approved.
Correct.
Right.
sub-agreements within that.
Correct. So one of the things that's upcoming and why we're so anxious to get this approved is obviously senior pictures happen in the summer. So that's, kind of needs to happen immediately. So given that we only have, one meeting in July, I feel it would be detrimental for one component of this to hold up kind of the entire contract and scheduling. We're getting ID printed in so that we can work on that. So.
Okay, well, I'm just bringing it up because the board received emails which were kind of a surprise, we didn't know. And there was nothing wrong with them, they were informative, they were very professional. So I'm just wondering now, is this going to meet, so it's gonna be an internal discussion now?
Correct.
And everybody on the yearbook committee understands that, they're happy with that?
Correct.
Okay. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the email was a little
Well, it was
Yeah.
just, it was discussing a specific piece.
In worst cases, we will work internally
Right.
to look at our different funds, so we don't pass on additional costs to our families.
Yeah, at least, not that big of a.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Appreciate it, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mindy.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kozowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Dr. Brenner?
Yes.
Dr. Katula?
Yes.
Mr. Sefner?
Yes.
And Dr. Burks?
Yes. And then we have a contract renewal for beverage services.
I'll make that motion to approve the 2-year contract renewal with beverage provider Coca-Cola.
Second.
Moved in second, additional discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kozowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Dr. Brenner?
Yes.
Dr. Katula? Mr. Sefner?
Yes.
And Dr. Burks?
Yes. And then we have our annual certification of hazardous bus routes. I need a motion, please.
I'll make that motion with our committee. Motion to approve the 2021-2022 annual certification of hazardous bus routes.
Second.
Moved in second, additional discussion. Let's do a roll call on this.
Mr. Kozowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Brenner?
Yes.
Dr. Katula? Dr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Mr. Sefner?
Yes.
And Dr. Burks?
Yes. And then we have the approval of an activity bus. I need a motion, please.
Motion to approve the purchase of a 2018 Chevrolet Microbird activity bus from Central States Bus Sales and Company in the amount of $42,500.
Second.
Moved in second, additional discussion. We did talk about this. Roll call, please.
Dr. Brenner?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Katula? Dr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Mr. Sefner?
Yes.
And Dr. Burks?
Yes. And last, we have some policies to put on.
Motion to place the attached District 115 Board of Education policies on display as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. On to new business, and we have.
Thanks for the markups, by the way. on those. Those are really nice. Anxious to do this. Good work.
IESA membership renewal.
Motion to approve the 2021-2022 IHSA membership as approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Additional discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Kozowitz?
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher?
Yes.
Dr. Brenner?
Yes.
Dr. Katula? Mr. Sefner?
Yes.
And Dr. Burks?
Yes. Then we have a one-on-one para-pro position discussion.
As we've seen from time to time, when we have a student move into the district, if we don't have the resources readily available for them, we'll request a one-to-one paraprofessional to support the student. We'll be bringing this back in July for approval. This right now is just for information.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Any questions or comments? Great, and then the assistant network administrator, also a discussion item.
Yes, so back in May, when I talked about the 3-year technology plan, I had talked to the board about some changes in as far as positions go in my department. Currently, we have one network administrator that handles everything on the back end of our district, all of our Google, all of our switching, our firewall, and we do not have any cross-training in that position. So when that member or when that employee goes on vacation, we're without somebody, if he's sick, he's always on call. So to help support with our growth over the last 10 years in our network department, I'm recommending that we create an assistant network administrator position that would be cross-trained. If that employee or whatever left or would be out for a significant time, we wouldn't miss a beat. We'd be able to split some of those duties. So from an efficiency standpoint, I'd be able to have 2 people in the network department, troubleshoot, work on projects, be at multiple buildings at the same time. The one thing that's really changed in the last 4 or 5 years is our district really cannot have any downtime when it comes to the network. When you're one-to-one and you're using an LMS, it's constant that the Wi-Fi, everything's working. So it also promotes growth inside our department, which is something that we talk about is there's currently not really any growth path for employees, possibilities for promotions, different areas. So this assistant network administrator position would reside right under the network administrator. If you look at my organizational chart, you can kind of see where that falls into place. I think it makes our department better from a standpoint of you have 2 people that in the most critical, piece of my department that is trained to troubleshoot, to work on items when the network's down. I believe it'll make us more efficient. So I'd be happy to answer any questions as far as the assistant network administrator position. This would be a 12-month position. This would be an actual 1 FTE added to the technology department. So we'd be adding another employee to help support that.
This is kind of tied together with our next piece of business here.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. And if possible with this position, if the board's comfortable with it, if we could post an anticipated opening, that would allow us to get ahead of that, and then bring back the position for approval and possibly a person in July, if we were to find somebody.
Yeah, it'd be better.
We talked about that we have a gap in this area anyway. We need to.
And it's like the one area that I lose sleep with. Our network administrator is phenomenal. He's been here 15 years. He's great. But if we were to ever lose him or lose his capacity for a while, we'd be in a tight situation. So I think it definitely benefits the district, this position.
So both of these positions really are something that you're going to be looking for people, and then you'll bring it back, and because by then you'll have an idea for salary and everything.
Ideally, yes. Yeah, the second one is more of a role change. If there's no network administrator, assistant network administrator questions, I can hop into that, talk a little bit about the security position and what that role is, because it's obviously the next item. Currently, we have a staff member that for the last 5 years now has ran all of our, when we say security, we're talking just from a technology standpoint, not physical security, but all of our door fobs, our cameras, programming, maintaining, working with our security department on locations and pulling video for buildings. So really, I've had just a computer technician doing that role for 5 years. So it's a lot more responsibility than just a regular computer technician. So we want to formalize that role. It goes with the technology department's goal of providing growth paths for employees. It's definitely a separate skill set. We've kind of changed that position. Originally, the person was responsible for all safety and security, all video, and we've kind of delegated some of that to Joe and Scott and that group. But really, we wanted to, working with Troy, to create a job description that if that person were to ever leave, or we were to, change things out, that we would have a set position that focuses on the cameras, the fobs, because we're adding cameras, we're adding door fobs it seems like every, couple of months. Security is obviously a big focal point in the district. Getting cameras in our elementary schools and someone maintaining that has been important. They do all the keep up when users come in and manage all of that. So this would be a role change. It'd be a formalized role and a salary adjustment. We would be bringing back, or an hourly adjustment, bringing back that in July.
So this is physical space security.
It's It's basically,
Not network security.
not networks, correct, it's all door fobs, cameras, maintaining program, we do all that in-house, so we don't do anything, we don't outsource any of that, that's all maintained here. So the programming of cameras, the managing of the software, setting up the roles, who has access to see what camera footage, the front office TVs and how all that works in the building. That's the actual role of the, and you can see, we attach the computer technician description, so you can see the computer technician role and then the additional responsibilities of the security piece of the computer technician.
So you'll, I wish you luck, Brian. These are
Hard position.
Yes.
hard positions, particularly the network position.
Yep.
It's a
Yeah.
tight labor market right now for those positions. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. And then next agenda item is the early childhood preschool for all classrooms.
So as you can imagine, we are identifying more and more at-risk students that would qualify for our early childhood program. This particular edition would qualify through our Preschool for All classroom, which evaluates students through Child Find. So we have a screening process where we interview the students and the families, and we ask for things about homelessness, foster care, board of the state, any history of drug abuse or alcohol abuse in the family, and then it rates them based on criteria. And then what we do as a district is we identify those students that are most at risk based on that criteria, and then we invite them for the program. At this point in time, we have 54 students that are on a wait list right now. The addition of another early childhood section would allow us to serve 40 of those students with a proposed location at your grade school. So we have a classroom that's available for that. That would be something that would be oversight by coordinator, who's here tonight, the early childhood coordinator, and then Emily Leck, our principal at your grade school too. And so I like to think of Preschool for All as pre-mediation instead of remediation down the road for us. So there is some financial investment from local funds that we're asking, but also we will combine the grant fund as well to try to offset some of the costs that are associated with the additional section.
Good investment.
Absolutely. It's where that intervention needs to be. Okay, and then last is the ISBE IDEH on HSA health guidelines. A lot of acronyms.
All right, so as you know, we have moved into the phase 5 of the Restore Illinois plan. And so in our community and surrounding communities, most of the restrictions for COVID have been lifted in the community. And so that has brought a lot of questions and concerns moving into the school year. And so I wanted to bring some information about where we are at as a district with COVID and the restrictions and what we are looking at for next school year based on the current guidance. And so if you look at our data in the community, our youth cases have been at minimal since May 23rd, all the way until now, which is June 28th. Our percentage of increase in positive COVID cases for the 7 days prior to today are at 0%, 0.0% in Yorkville, 0.08% in Kendall County, and then 0.12% in Illinois. So the cases clearly have decreased, but there's been lots of different guidance that has been provided pertaining to schools and sports. And so the current guidance that we follow was published on March 21st, which was the IDPH and ISB guidance pertaining to schools. And then an update to that guidance was provided on June 7th. In that June 7th guidance, masks are required to be worn in school buildings for vaccinated and unvaccinated staff and students. So whether you're vaccinated or not, you're required to wear a mask. Where some of the confusion comes in or conflicting information is that there has been some all sports guidance that has been provided through the Restore Illinois that says that you may remove your mask during sports if you are fully vaccinated. But in that same guidance, it says that, the schools are governed by ISB and IDPH, and the guidance from June 7th trumps that. So throughout the school year, we have been following a 3 to 6 foot distance within the classroom, and masks are required to be worn. There's a 50-person limit on all school buses. Those are the main challenging guidances that we have in the classroom or in the cafeteria setting. If students or staff remove their masks, they're required to be 6 feet apart, which is another difficult task to follow, which we have done. We've made it work. But moving into next school year, we are anxiously awaiting some new guidance from IDPH and ISB to give us, what those next steps are. Now that the community is in phase 5, how will that impact what our schools look like? For planning purposes, at the moment, we are planning as if the current guidance would stand for next year, with the 3 to 6 foot distance, masks being required in the school buildings, and a 50-person limit on the school bus. Any questions?
Well, I was at a legislative luncheon last week and brought this topic up. The legislators, I think, are just as frustrated as anybody else, but the problem is they do not expect any new guidance on this until later this summer. And the reality is that that's probably true. And the discussion behind it, it's got to do with the variants, it's got to do with vaccination of younger children. There's all kinds of variables going on. It doesn't really address the big issue down the road with vaccination, which that's going to be an interesting one when that comes up. So I think they're just leaving things as they are because they don't have solid answers to give us, or at least from their viewpoint yet. We do know that if you don't follow that guidance, there's some really serious repercussions for school districts that didn't.
Yeah, there's a district, Red Hill School District 10, Southern Illinois, I believe it is. Their board passed a resolution to make masks optional for the school district. The state board came back with a formal response to them. They've been put on probation. They've lowered their recognition status and given them basically 60 days to rectify that. If not, they will be non-recognized as a public school district in the state of Illinois, which obviously comes with financial implications. And certainly they have, as they've stated in their letter to the school district, they've exhibited deficiencies that present a health hazard or a danger to students and staff. So that's the state board's perspective. And obviously, as that comes to a school district, that opens us also up from a legal aspect. If something were to happen, our insurance would not support us in a claim or certainly in a lawsuit or similar.
Yeah, and maybe you also, LUDA, the superintendents have written the state, put pressure on the state to try to get further guidance. You've seen a lot of superintendents independently put pressure on the state to provide guidance. We are in planning stages right now, and it is critical that they provide as much updates as they possibly can. So I think this isn't just our frustration level, it's every district in the state is frustrated with this lack of guidance.
Yeah, I put a letter in public view for everybody that I signed from the 50 largest school districts in the state, asking the state board to immediately give us direction for next year, so that as a board, you can all make a decision and we can all look at all of our options with our legal counsel. Certainly, I think there's things that I see that are going on that doesn't make sense to me, where we can have kids and Gary, Dr. Julie might be able to provide insight to it, but we have kids in summer school class with masks on that are 6 feet apart, but we have athletes on fields or Cubs or Sox games filled to the brim with people that could be unvaccinated. I don't know it. To me, that doesn't make sense. As this board knows, back in August, September, every month that went by, I looked at our local numbers. All the school districts stayed out. I said, well, we're looking to see what happens here, what's important for us. I still believe in that, to look at what's important to us and what are our numbers telling us here. But we need some direction from the state. We need some direction from the governor, from IDPH, and as of yet, we haven't received it.
So I just kind of wanted to put something in perspective because we just reviewed the tentative budget. If we didn't follow this guidance, we would jeopardize approximately $25 million of federal and state money. So on a $94 million budget, that's substantial. And that would have to be all provided by global funding if we chose to do that. And like Dr. Schiff said, other districts that have tried to do it, this one of them were threatened by ICE to get taken over. So it's a substantial amount of money that we risk.
It puts the community at risk, and that's the problem, and it's unfair, but it's what it is. And to ask our constituents, and not all of them have children in school, but they still fund the school, to potentially increase their tax by 25% would be actually more than that. It's just not tenable. I mean, just can't do it. And the bigger risk I see is that our insurer won't cover us because we would be in direct violation of state law. So it's a problem. We're hoping to get some new guidance, but until we do, these type of legal entanglements, unless we become a private school, are going to follow us.
Tim, in my mind, ultimately, I think we're a little premature in what we're talking about, what we're even doing, because we have to wait for guidance. The CDC has said that they would give us something over the next few weeks. That's what we hope for, and we hope that the CDC gives us information that makes sense. I agree with you. It's difficult to watch a wrestling match when two kids can wrestle and then not be allowed to shake hands afterwards. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. But on the same token, we've done very well at, we kept kids in school. We were able to keep kids in sports. We did as much as we could. I think it's just a matter of we have to wait and see what the guidance is going to be. And I think there's multiple factors on that. Part of it is, are we going to see increased disease? We knew in summertime people would get better. Viral diseases that are respiratory get better in the summertime. We knew that with vaccination rates going up, it immediately impacted hospitalization in severe cases. I mean, that goes without saying. So more vaccinations, less disease. So how many kids who are 12 and above are going to get vaccinated is probably a factor. What the CDC is waiting for to see what's going to happen. I think that's going to play a role. If we have a 70 or 80% vaccination rate in that population, it'll be a very easy decision for what to do. If we see a 20% vaccination rate, I don't know what happens to a classroom of 30 that no longer is 6 feet apart and someone shows up with a positive infection. I don't know what'll happen if everyone's unmasked. Our current mitigation rules would suggest that you just had a classroom of kids sent home again. I don't know that that's what we want to be doing going into the next school year, but that's the reality. So again, I think we have to wait to see what the vaccination rates are. We have to see what kind of infections we're going to see. There will be another further wave as we close our windows and everybody goes inside in the winter time. We'll just have to see, but we'll get guidance. We hope that it makes sense. And again, I encourage everyone to get vaccinated.
The other piece that I didn't bring up yet, but we are working with the high school to look at what type of testing or screening options we have moving into next school year. So as you all know, right now we have the CLIA waiver that allows us to provide a Buy Next Now test to any symptomatic students. with parents' permission or any staff members that are symptomatic. And so that is one of the options that we could move forward with next year. There's another option where we could provide the Buy Next Now rapid COVID tests to athletes. IDPH recommends and ISB recommends that you provide a weekly test to athletes that are in high contact sports as a screening measure. So we have that option, and then another option where we would automatically screen all athletes, not just the high contact. So, we're looking at what those options look like, and when further guidance comes out, then we'll bring that information back and share that with you. The tests that we currently have are provided free to us from the Kendall County Health Department. And with our CLIA waiver, our staff is able to provide that test.
I want to go back to the original public comment from Tim Gleason. And I've had a couple different conversations with Tim, and they've been very productive, and I think we're more similar than we are apart on what we want for our kids in our community. And I've appreciated the insights that have been provided and the conversations. A couple things with the petition that is stated is that basically I have the right to choose whether my child wears a mask. Mask mandates for children have no impact on the health of our community. The governor does not have lawful authority to mandate mask wearing to my child, and requesting proof of a COVID vaccination under the current emergency use violates HIPAA laws. He did state that those who have signed it have agreed that unless the mandates in our district are withdrawn as of July 19th, these individuals will not have their children participate in our Yorkville sponsorship. So I just want to make sure the board's aware of that. Asking what options we have. If the state board does not issue new guidelines by the 19th of July, I think we've talked about that. I'm hoping we have some new information in the coming weeks. As of now, we don't have any further information.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what else you can do with that. If somebody's choosing that their kid's not going to be in sports, so be it.
Well, that is their
That's the right, absolutely.
what else we're supposed to do.
Last is superintendent for communication.
Just a few things, just to let the board's aware, Septran had a number of their vehicles, their catalytic converters were stolen over the weekend. As you know, it's been very common the last year and a half or so. My daughter actually had hers taken from her Prius in the city, but so they're working through that. Didn't impact transportation necessarily for summer school, but in case you hear anything. We have a couple of updates from the high school. I'm going to ask David to provide some of our student accomplishments and spring athletics and stuff.
We finished up spring athletics and had a great spring athletic season. We've had 3 SBC team champions, boys cross country, girls cross country, and softball. We've had 4 regional championships, boys and girls cross country again, baseball and softball. We had a sectional finals in baseball. Unfortunately, the boys lost to the eventual state champions in a tough game, but certainly we had a great season. Our girls softball won sectionals and went to the sectional champions, super sectional, and lost to Manuka, who we beat twice in a year. So it's tough, but we're bouncing back and coming back. Dory's pretty excited for next year already. Our boys cross country was also sectional champs. And then we had an individual state champion. Kyle Claymore won the shot put in boys track and field. And we had several, 2 other boys place down there. And then we finished up with 33 students committed to play athletics in college, senior commitments at the end of the year. And then right now we have 2,025 students signed up for athletic games. We're pretty busy in high school. the last couple of weeks, and we will be for the rest of the summer. So that is our update for athletics. Thank you.
There'll be a number of students that we're bringing to the July board meeting to recognize,
Correct.
as well as some students with the seal by literacy that they've earned. So look forward to some celebrations in July. I would like to ask the board about, there were some comments last committee meeting about starting committees at 6 o'clock when we do our committee meetings. I don't know what the board's thoughts are on that as we move into the rest of the summer and into the fall, or if you'd like to maintain the 7 o'clock start time for committees.
We keep the business meeting, the committee meetings we start earlier. So think about it. We don't have a committee meeting in July. We won't have a committee meeting till August.
So no response back to the next week.
Would love to have a response in July.
Sure.
Just a reminder, board work session, July 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, 8:30 to noon-ish. And then just a thanks again, Mike Vargas. This Thursday, 30th will be his last day, and Troy Courtney will be his last day. Mike is heading off to District 214. And Troy is heading off to retirement, but we'll be back a little bit as we start negotiations in August. So congratulations.
We do have a closed session, so we need a motion, please.
Motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel of the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. 5 ILCS 120/2C1, the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussion of whether a particular parcel should be acquired. 5 ILCS 120/2C5, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular public body has been filed and is pending in a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that such an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. 5 ILCS 120/2C5.
Second.
Moved and seconded. A roll call, please.
Dr. Katsula,
Yes.
Dr. Schumacher,
Yes.
Dr. Brenner,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowitz,
Yes.
and Dr. Burks.
Yes, there will be no action after the closed session. Enjoy the holiday, and we'll see everyone at the end of July.